to please take their seats on the dais. Good morning, everyone. On behalf of the School of Human Settlements, XIM University, Bhubaneswar, I extend a very warm welcome to all of you to the plenary session 3 of the 10th Annual Research on City Summit. Marking a decade of academic excellence, the School of Human Settlements has established itself as a premier institution for navigating the managerial and strategic dimensions of the modern urban realm. Founded in 2016 to bridge the critical talent gap in the sector, SHS has launched India's first MBA in urban management and governance. Today, we have evolved into a comprehensive educational ecosystem equipping a new generation of leaders to address the multifaceted challenges of urbanization. Upholding its commitment to fostering meaningful dialogue among policymakers, practitioners, and researchers, the School of Human Settlements is proud to present the annual Research on City Summit ARCS. ARCS is a premier platform for critical engagement with pressing urban realities. In the era defined by rapid urban transformation and increasing complexity, this year's conference directs our collective attention to the critical imperative new approaches to government and resilience. We are honored to have with us today Dr. Debulina Kundu, Professor at National Institute of Urban Affairs, New Delhi. Dr. Debulina Kundu is a professor at National Institute of Urban Affairs, NIUA, India, with over 20 years of professional experience in the field of development studies. Her experience across research, policy, and I would now I would now invite Professor Dr. Kajri Mishra to welcome our speaker. I would now request Dr. Debulina Kundu to please take the stage.
Namaskar. A very good morning to all of you. I would like to take this opportunity to thank the organizers for having me here. Before I get into the presentation, I would like to mention to all of you, like many of you may not be aware of who we are. We are the National Institute of Urban Affairs. We have completed 50 years of our existence in the country. We are a premier institution, the knowledge and think tank of the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India. We basically work on research in the urban space. We also work on the policy aspects of the Government of India and also capacity building of officials who work across the 5,000 odd urban local bodies in the country. Before I get into the presentation, I would also like to inform you, like you may have a question, what is it that we do in policy? So very briefly, like the Government of India documents which come up, which really guides the state governments, because urban development in India is a state subject. So every state has the final onus of managing urban areas. I think most of you are management students, so it is very critical for your knowledge to be groomed in a direction which can help cities to function adequately as you go ahead in your career. And in the National Urban Conclave, which we had sometime in November last year, the Minister of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, did launch, and our secretary launched the Team Urban, who would basically, I think you all are part of that group, who would basically work with the city governments in days to come. And many of you may be already working with different organizations. So, how do we really create the path for sustainable um, governance, sustainable development, keeping in mind the inputs that are needed from various areas of research that you are currently doing? It could be planning, it could be finance, it could be governance, or it could be a plethora of other things, or it could be a combination of all. Uh, so the topic of the deliberations which have started yesterday, I'm sorry I could not come yesterday. I think it's very much needed. I think we need to rethink urban governance for a future where climate, uh, the impact of climate is already there, and what would be the final outcome, none of us know. So things are happening. The impact of climate on cities is already perceptible, and I think our knowledge, which is being created in various planning schools, various management schools, universities, colleges, I think we all need to address those challenges in a much more balanced and collaborative manner. Cities, as we all are aware, are looked at engines of economic growth. They contribute to economic growth of our country. They also, there is an aspiration of people to migrate from villages to cities. Most important is livelihood, healthcare, education, good transport, and also basic services and utilities. Cities are also hubs of innovation and entrepreneurship. I think we all are aware. We would always like to go to a big city or work in a good city, because that also attracts skilled professionals from abroad, and other areas attracts FDI, and also they help in promoting research and development. The all these also aid to economic and social mobility, and there is connection and global integration of large cities uh, in in the country. And cities, because of all these factors, cities are also being able to create and contribute to the GDP of the country. There are various estimations. The last actual calculation of GDP in urban areas happened in 2011-12. Post that, there has been several estimations by World Bank, by Niti Aayog, around 60%, 75%, but the actual percentage is around 52% of the GDP in the country is generated by urban areas. The reason being, I think one of the most important factors why, if you correlate urban population with GDP, the percentage is not very high, because if you look at the industrial locations, industries contribute to uh, a high share of GDP. However, the SEZs which are coming up, or the industries, they are mostly located in areas beyond municipal boundaries. So that gets calculated in the rural areas. Again, urban GDP is top heavy. I think 600 urban centers generate about 60% of the global GDP. And again, urban productivity leads to agglomeration impacts. And in addition to industry, I think service sector is highly urban concentrated, and that also results in contribution to the GDP. If we look at globally across countries, and if you look at India, the states and UTs, there is a strong positive correlation between level of urbanization and per capita income, which means the more developed you are in terms of economic growth, the more number of towns and cities you have, the more is the urban area. I'll just take you through the world urbanization trends very briefly. So 2007 was the landmark year when global population exceeded 50% urban. That means more than 50% of the global population started living in urban areas in 2007 onwards. Currently, we are around 60% population living in urban areas, and by 2050 will be around 67 to 68%, given the current definitions of different countries. And if you look at the pattern of urban growth that is likely to happen, two continents, Asia and Africa, these two continents will be the focus, the epicenter of urbanization in this current century. Because the other continents which are already developed, there has already a slackening of overall growth in population, and urban growth is also one of the major components, because most of the current generation either do not have a child or at the max has only one child. So that really reflects on the declining fertility and also a very constricted urban pyramid. So these maps basically show how the percentage of urban is um, spans out across the globe. The darker red means higher level of urbanization. These are cities by size class of urban settlements. With time, what we see is the number of dots are increasing and also the size of the dots are increasing. And that is more so in the continents of Africa and Asia. And Delhi is poised to be the largest conurbation of the world in the years to come, taking over Tokyo. Now we come to India. When we look at India's urbanization, you are all aware that 2011 was the last uh, decade when we have the census figures with us. There are several, again, estimations done by different government and non-government agencies. But overall, I think currently we are around 36% urban. More than 500 million people live in urban areas. And by 2047, when India is likely to become a developed or country or a Viksit Bharat, will be having, initially we thought will be 50% urban, but the recent World Urbanization Prospect reports, if you look at those, there has been some change in the methodology for calculating the urban, as a result of which there's a bit slackening of the growth and will be around 43 to 45% urban in the next 22 years. However, if we use the Digarbha methodology, which looks at which divides the world into grids using population density and also built up spaces. As per that, India is already 84% urban. And I'll come to that in a little while. Again, we call this century the urban century. The reason why, I think whenever the census results come, the first flashing headline will be India has added more to the urban population. Last year it did come, but that was the provisional, that finding was based on the provisional results. But when we came up with the final population totals, there was slight sluggish growth, because of which both the figures were around 95 million. 95 million people were added to rural areas and so to urban areas. So the sorry, 91 million. The point which I'm making is this 2001-11 census decade was in a way a landmark decade, because there in that decade both the incremental population in rural and urban was almost same. However, since 2011, whenever the census results come, you will find that the increment in urban will be far more than in rural. And can someone tell me the reason why? And sorry, 2011, if you look at this chart, 91 million people were added to rural areas and another 91 to urban areas. But post 2011, whenever we have the census results, by projection, it shows that between 11-21, 92.8 million people were added to urban areas, right? However, to rural, it was only 58 million. You please, have you, did not stand? Yeah, it's a very common sense answer.
Between rural and urban, the way we define them is
No, we are not changing the definition. Definition remaining the same. Sorry? Yeah, so two factors. So people would not ever want to migrate from rural to urban to rural. If you are in urban areas, you would hardly go back to your rural areas, to your villages, right? You may go for a month or a week, but you would like to stay in an urban setting. So that it only happened, the reverse migration happened during COVID, and that was in a way forced migration. People did not have livelihood, so they went back to the villages. However, there is a tendency of people to migrate to urban areas. So rural to urban migration is one, and the other is expansion of the boundaries of our urban centers. That is happening, but rural areas, the boundary expansion, even if it happens, it will not happen at a scale comparable to urban areas. So these are the two major factors because of which the increment in urban is happening and will happen in the urban areas in the years to come. And also our country does have, and another thing, if whenever you read a research paper, you will first line says, first sentence, India is rapidly urbanizing, which is untrue, right? If you look at this graph, the orange line graph, since 81, there has been a decline in the growth rate of urban population. It is only in 2001-11 that the growth rate increased by 0.3%, and that happened because 2,530 new census towns were added for the first time. And again, if you look at the graph on the right hand side, what you find, our country has a very top heavy urban structure, which means more than 70% of our urban population lives in large cities, class 1 cities. What are class 1 cities? Cities with a population of more than 100,000 population. So I'm just taking you through this urban trajectory because for some of you who may not be aware of where we are, I think it's very important to inform us on the way we are urbanizing and also the urban pattern and what implications it has for policy. So urban governance, which is the theme of this conference, I think that the basic structure is based on population because you are governing people. So we also, because of which we need to know where do the people reside, in what type of towns and what are their needs. So when 2 years back we had the chief secretary's conference, the honorable Prime Minister takes a meeting of all chief secretaries at the end of the year. And 2 years back, the topic was urban governance. And I took this slide from that presentation, and because we prepared the deck for the presentation to the Honorable Prime Minister, and these presentations are done by chief secretaries of different states. So maybe if the presentation is for 1 hour, it is divided between 5 or 6 state chief secretaries, and maybe 1 or 2 municipal commissioners. They also add to the best practices that happens or is happening in a particular city or state. So the point which I am trying to make is, if you look at the pie, what we find is we can divide the population into almost one third, one third, one third. One third, more than one third living in large cities, million plus cities. Another more than a third is living in class 1 cities, cities with a population of more than 100,000. And the remaining less than a third are living in more than 3,500 odd cities, which really means there is a concentrated growth of population in our cities, and whatever policies we make needs to be tuned to that direction. Another very important area, I think, which needs to be very clear in your minds as students is that how do we measure urban? So anyone can you throw some light? Any of the students here? Any of the participants? How does India measure or calculate urban? What are the types of urban centers? Sorry for so many questions, but I think it is very important just not to listen, but also to interact. Good. What are the two types of urban centers when you look at the census? Have you ever, any of you looked at the census, or you just ask AI to do the research for you? Sorry? Census towns. Good. So how do we define? You don't have to go to the basic definition. Just how do you, what is the difference?
Population, we define statutory towns or census town by the size of the population, basically.
Okay. So urbanization in the country is a result of people coming and living in urban areas, right? And because urban development is a state subject, each state defines or notifies statutory towns across the year. It gets enumerated in the census. However, this is a continuous process, right? So that is the statutory town. And what happens in addition to that, the Registrar General of India, based on 3 criteria. One is density of 400 persons per square kilometer, 5,000, at least 5,000, and 75% of the male main workers, not female, right? They need to be in non-farm. So if these things happen at the same time, a village is notified as a town. What town? Census town. However, please remember this, and throughout your life, I think you need to remember, if you are working in the urban space, these census towns are not administrative structures under the urban administration. They are all under the Ministry of Panchayati Raj, MOPR. So although they are urban by definition, they are rural by governance. So when you are looking at climate sensitive urban planning, urban governance, I think we need to also take cognizance of these census towns. And when we look at the Dayurba method of classifying urban, there are rural settlements which are less than census towns in terms of their population density, population size, and also the livelihood pattern. However, they contribute to the urban space. So the paper which we did for economic survey this year does talk about. The first sentence says that Indian cities, Indian urban centers are more work beyond the administrative definition. The functional and economic imprint of Indian urban centers go beyond the administrative definition because we do not confine to the statutory limits. Your institution, I believe, I correct me if I'm wrong, is in a peri-urban area, right? So this is under a village panchayat. However, you have, I think, all sorts of amenities here. So that is very important to understand while you are working in the urban space. So we have currently more than 4,000, I think 5,000 census towns and 5,006 statutory towns. So in all, over 10,000 urban centers across the country. Suppose we did not look at the census towns, then our the increase in the level of urbanization in the last decade, 2001-11, would have been less than 1%, from 25.6 to 26.3. It is because of the addition of the census towns that we found an increase in the level of urbanization. Here I have tried to indicate how different other countries they define urban, and if if India would go only by population criteria, which is 5,000 persons in a settlement, we would be 47% urban in 2011. Only density 78%, only economic activity 36%, which is close to 31%. However, if we use the geospatial way, as I mentioned, the Diggerba method of classification, we are currently 84% urban, and in 2050 we would be close to 86% urban. So we have started working on a few states. We have completed Odisha, we have completed Kerala, we have completed Bihar, Haryana, Madhya Pradesh, and Maharashtra. So this graph was added in the urban chapter of the economic survey this year. So if we use the Diggerba functional urban areas, what we find is there is a huge expanse of 526 functional areas in Kerala in 2025. 461 urbanizing settlements and 665 already established urban centers. So whenever the 2026-27, I do not know when the census operations will happen, that may to some extent be captured in the pattern which is emerging from the analysis which we are doing. So this is, I tried to capture some of Odisha's Bhubaneswar Cuttack region, and also using this method we have identified 2658 functional urban areas in 2020, and they account for 28.3 lakh population, highlighting the urgent need for formal recognition and also the urban integration, because until and unless that happens, policies cannot be really catering to the needs of these newly emerging urban centers. And also currently these are not even acknowledged as urban. So there are insights from other states also. I'll leave this presentation with you all. In case you would like to work with us as interns, you are most welcome, so that you also have a first-hand experience in understanding how we go about using these methodologies. So drivers of urban, I think we have already discussed. One is natural increase, the other is net rural urban migration, which is around 20 to 22% over the last 3-4 decades. It's almost the same. Natural increase has been declining, and net reclassification is the most important bit, because of which we are showing we are experiencing urbanization, because urbanization is happening basically in the transition zones. It's not that too many people are coming to urban areas, it's just the peripheries are, there has been a lot of built up mm, activity happening in and around cities, and also corridorization along the main corridors, be it railway, be it the highways. There's a lot of speculation and lot of real estate development, and you see that happening all across the country. So again, when you look at the types of migration, urban to urban, I think that is increasing very rapidly. Rural to rural, it's almost, although it is dominant, but it's declining. Urban to rural, reverse migration is very marginal. And rural to urban, that increase is also very sluggish. This I've already discussed. So here we have tried to use nightlight data to show how the built-up area is increasing across large cities in the country. Bangalore, Delhi, you see how radially the nightlight is increasing. Same with Mumbai. Now to the final point. Why does urban governance matter? And how is it linked to climate? I think we are all aware that cities are increasingly becoming more vulnerable to floods, heat waves, and also the resource stress, making urban governance very central to climate resilience. And I think all of you are aware of the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act. Can someone tell me? When did it come to being, and why did it come in place for the first time? Why? So cities as the third tier of governance was established through the 74th Constitutional Amendment Act, and the 12th schedule was added, because of which 18 key functions, including planning, land use, health, sanitation, infrastructure, were to be carried out by the local self-governments in cities. However, the entire process has been a bit sluggish and fractured, and even now you do not find 100% decentralization to have happened across the country. I think urban governance also needs to ensure that climate considerations are embedded in our city planning, land use, infrastructure design, disaster risk management, which is happening. I won't say it does not happen, but that's again in a very unstructured manner. Again, we are trying to promote sustainable and resilient infrastructure through the Amrut mission, which is looking at preparing cities to become water secure. However, we do not find strong urgency from the city governments or from the state governments for adoption of green infrastructure or green finance. And building capacity, I think that is very important, because until and unless we capacitate the officials, have caderization in our urban local bodies, that becomes a challenge. I was just a little while ago, we were discussing, Kajri madam and me, like she did mention that one of her PhD students is working on this critical area of capacity building, and I think that is one area where you all need to focus your attention, because until we have the capacities, we cannot capacitate the officials. So that is a very important area, and also mobilizing resources. Uh, in one of the studies conducted by Janagraha 2 years back, what we found was 474 large urban centers in the country. They contribute to more than three-fourths of the own revenues of the country. So even if we forget the census towns, we know there are more than 5,000 statutory towns in the country, which are urban local bodies established through the state governments. So if you look at their finances, all of those, among them, three-fourths are catered to by only a few. So I think it's very important to make the urban centers more competitive in terms of resource raising and also delivering urban services to the citizens. I think coordination of with stakeholders is also very important. The international, national, regional, and local, the interdepartmental, the vertical and the horizontal coordination is very important. And also understanding what is disaster preparedness and how do we respond to those, and bringing community. I think Orissa is one of the states where the former secretary brought in the Jaga mission, right? And also the Mukta. I think all this together tried to build the the capacities of the communities in building infrastructure and also maintaining. I do not know what is the current condition, but 2-3 years back we included these as good practices for the Chief Secretary's conference, where we found that the community involvement in the state of Orissa is again very important. I think the IPCC 6A our findings are, you are all aware that how what is the importance of urban governance for climate change, be it water scarcity, heat, inland flooding, and also the socio-economic vulnerability. It is people living in the informal settlements in slums who are most impacted, who are most vulnerable, and who also pay the price for whatever the better of sections of the population we do in terms of creating infrastructure. So on behalf of the Government of India, as I mentioned, there is the Amrut mission, which is looking at making cities water secure. Swachh Bharat mission, again, looking at improving the behaviors of the citizens to make cities more clean. Building houses for the citizens, the livelihood, the PMAY urban mission, the PME bus seva, which is again transport facilities, the day NULM for livelihood, PM Swanidhi again for livelihood, bringing administration closer to the people through the National Urban Digital Mission, and which is again a offshoot of the Smart Cities Mission, which was there for 100 cities. And what we are trying to do is also repurpose the ICCCs, the integrated command and control centers, which were set up in all the 100 cities under the Smart Cities Mission. Look at those as centers which can really create real-time data. It could be on transport, it could be on various climatic parameters, and then inform the urban local body to take decisions based on the real-time data. So that is what we are trying to help them with. And also under the Cities 2.0 program, we are funding creation of climate observatories in each state and climate cells in each city. Maharashtra is already done. Many state governments are working in that direction. So how do we create cities which have GIS-based master plans, not only confined to the city boundaries but beyond, have a more regional perspective, and that can also help the data infrastructure, the digital data can also, which is again real time, can uh, influence policy. The NIUA and the ministry, we together we embarked on the climate smart cities assessment framework, which evaluates cities on 28 indicators on urban planning and biodiversity, energy and green buildings, mobility, water and waste management. So these indicators are there for 225 cities over a period of time, and I think this is at least the initiation of data driven governance, because until and unless you have data on various facets of thematic areas which impact climate, we cannot have climate um, sensitive master plans. And in most of our missions from the government of India, climate components do figure. So even for Swachh Bharat mission, we are trying to bring in circularity in whatever is being done in the 18 cities under the cities program. We are also trying to have circularity as the central focus, and those cities, once they achieve certain degree of maturity, can also influence cities in their neighborhood to pair up and also to incentivize other cities in doing so. The state action plans on climate change, I think this is also a very important initiation to have climate sensitive master plans. And before I end, I would also like to talk about the Urban Challenge Fund of rupees 1 lakh crore, where through which I think we are trying to incentivize cities as growth hubs. There is a meeting tomorrow of the state government of Orissa on this important topic, where the Niti Aayog and state government of Orissa, they are working together. And we are also looking at creative redevelopment of cities and to provide water supply and sanitation to at least 100 large cities through bankable projects. It's not that the other cities will not get, but improving the bankability of cities is very important. And the most important trait of this entire architecture is that only 25% of the finances will come from the central government. The remaining 75 needs to come from the market. So that is a challenge which the urban local bodies will have in the days to come, because for urban local bodies where property tax and user charges have not gone to a level which can attract the market, I think there they need to really firm up. So if you look at the state of Orissa, I think one very important uh, area where the state is already ahead is the state has a rural urban transition policy. And in the 16th Finance Commission, there is the mention of a grant of 10,000 crore rupees as urbanization premium grant as a one-time incentive to support merger of peri-urban villages into adjoining ULBs. The ULBs should have a population of at least 1 lakh population. So if this precondition is met, the state government will get a grant. So I think Orissa will be the first state to take this grant, and also Orissa can advise other states how to go about. So what I understand is that, as I have already mentioned, that we need to have long-term master plans and not the rigid ones, but master plans need to be more adaptive and scenario-based. Urban planning needs to be there, where climate, as we move forward, we need to bring in more of nature-based solutions. And there needs to be strong coordination among departments. And generally, we try to always function in silos. The right hand does not know what the left hand is doing. In various institutions, in across governments. So I think there needs to be more synergy as we go forward. And uh, the government of India did set up 5 working groups on urban governance in 2024. Those were on political and administrative structures, on synergizing the way the urban local bodies and the parastatals work. Do you know what a parastatal is? What? Yeah, so they are state level agencies which work on various urban services. So generally the parastatals, PHEDs do not talk to the ULBs. So we have tried to nudge through the working group to find a mid path to make both the parastatals and the urban local bodies to work together, to collaborate and not to compete. And one was on rural urban transition. So how do we look at the rural urban continuum? So that was again one very important area. And finally, the most important area is capacity building. Until and unless we have good capacities at all levels, I think things will not work. So at NIUA we have the National Urban Learning Platform, and we are trying to work with the IGOT, the CBC, so that the CBC is trying to bring in behavioral change among citizens through the officials, and we are trying to technically improvise the capacities of the officials. So how do we work together? So that is the Capacity Building Commission and the NIUA are trying to join hands in facilitating or improving the capacities of the urban local bodies. And that is one thing which I thought I need to mention. And as you saw that the definition of urban in India is quite rigid. So we were asked by the government of India to take a relook at the urban definition. So that research is already on. We are also working with the NITI. There's an interministerial committee on calculation, on looking at the best methodology for calculation of GDP at the city level. You have GDP at the national level, you have GDP at the state level. However, we do not have a methodology to calculate GDP at the city level. So what is that best methodology? We are working on that. And also with NITI, we are working on small city initiative. So as you are aware, we have a plethora of small towns, towns less than 100,000 population. If we include census towns, we are 9,500. We do have 9,500 small towns in the country, towns which have less than 100,000 population. So how do those towns benefit from this challenge fund or from other government programs, and how do we plan for them in a sustainable manner? How can they be nudged to improve their governance? So on that, we are again working with the Niti Aayog. So I end here. Thank you so much. Before I end, I would also like to mention that we have just now set up a center for policy research where we are trying to connect academia, policy, practice, industry, and learn from each other and have a team urban who could work together on various areas. I think it's challenging because we all think that we all are supreme. So instead of collaborating, we generally have a more of a competitive mindset. But I think we need to come out of our silos and work together in order to have a sustainable planet. I think prosperity, people are planet. These three are very important. We all need want to prosper, and we means we are the people, and we need to have a planet for the generations to come. So I urge all of you to have that perspective while you work and while you are also thinking about having a more balanced earth for our next generations and also for us. Thank you so much for your attention.
Dr. Kundu has just given us a complete and fairly detailed snapshot of what is happening in the country. Not only the status of urbanization, but what the state is thinking about it, the state as in the government is thinking about it, particularly also how Odisha has certain initiatives from the past and is ongoing programs where we do have very innovative examples uh, that we can actually see how we can uh, learn from them and probably help other states or ask the government of India to include that in their policies, and particularly how NIUA has been spearheading both research and policy innovations. It's not just about actual development innovations, but also about policy innovations. One of the things that we have been discussing in this conference, both in the formal sessions as well as offline amongst us, is the whole idea of policy support for more sustainable urbanization. What kind of policy innovations are also required? And I think today we got a very clear picture of where we are headed in that perspective. Now, I think the floor is open for questions. There's already a question.
Uh, Good afternoon, ma'am. Uh, Thank you so much for the things you presented. It was really insightful. And you talked about the informal settlements, like those people are the ones, the economically weaker sections are the ones who face the consequence of the climate resilient policies. Like many climate resilient urban projects, they value they protect the high value assets, because of which the informal settlements are the one who face the consequence. So how can urban governance ensure that climate resilience does not deepen the urban inequalities in this regard? Sure, ma'am.
Hi, ma'am. It's a great presentation. So I have a very simple question. Like we all talk about the urban policy and the innovation. So when you want to work toward the innovation, you need to have a innovation on the ground. So when the startup works on a climate innovation or a sustainable development, generally they doesn't able to work towards the ULB because they have their own sort of criteria or take which they are following from last 10 years, I think. And even if the startup get a chance, they do one or two pilot, they didn't scale much on ULB part because it's a very long road for a startup to scale on a ULB part. So is there any policy reformation we are talking about to get more startup towards a ULB and make it more sustainable towards them?
Uh, good afternoon, ma'am. I have a question. That do you think that India's urban fiscal framework is gradually moving towards from the municipal finance towards something that is more larger, involving multiple institutions that you just said that collaboration between the various other institution? If yes, what structural reforms from union budget right now, from that what are needed to align those? That's the question. Thank you.
So the the point which you were making, that while infrastructure is being created in cities, how do we ensure that the vulnerable communities are, who are currently the most hard hit in terms of either whatever climate stress happens, flooding or temperature rise, how do we ensure that their concerns uh, are also taken into consideration? I think the most important is knowledge. So for that, we need to capacitate our officials until and unless they understand the way they need to go about. So when a infrastructure is being created in a certain area where the urban poor live in informal settlements, so they need to be relocated. And the way we treat as they and us, we need to also treat them as part of us. So that thinking needs to percolate in the entire system, be it the central government or the state government or the local government or the other stakeholders. And when we are talking of community, that community cannot be because they are not as well off as we are in terms of both education and also wherewithal. So that sensitization of the officers who go to bulldoze in the name of development, such things do happen. I think there we have a very critical role to sensitize our policy and also the people who work for the people, right? The officials. I think that's a very important thing. Your question on the startups, I think I do not know what is the amount, but under the Amrut program, which also has its state level manifestations, there is a scope for startups to survive. I do not know the modalities, but please look up to the website. I think the details should be there. And your question on the ULBs going for multi-stakeholder, I think that is important. It's not only that we are going to the private sector, as the budget announcement has highlighted, but even to go to the private sector, I think it is important that you set your home right first. The credit worthiness needs to come at first. Then only will the private sector come to a city to invest, be it a water supply project or a sanitation circularity project, whatever be the type of the project. But until and unless we have our urban local bodies functioning in a manner where there is a credit worthiness, things will not happen. Either international agencies or domestic agencies will show interest in collaborating with an urban local body, provided there is something they will benefit, because they will look only at profit motive. They do not have any social motive, right? Social upgradation, nothing of that sort. So they will come with only one motive, that is profit making. So only if we are able to do that, incentivize that, that only things will happen. So this is a very difficult thing to really take the urban challenge fund seriously, because if you look at the state of urban finances just now in the country, the local bodies, things are not much rosy. So each urban local body has to work in that direction, and I think user charges is also very important, because we generally expect that the corporation will provide us services, but are we doing? Me, I live in Vasant Kunj in South Delhi. I pay a property tax of around 4,000 rupees only for a two floor. I have two floors in my flat. Duplex flat, I'm paying only 4,000 rupees as property tax in a year. And my electricity bill during the summer months, at times it comes to 10,000. I'm okay with that. But even for paying 4,000, you will find there are many households who are not paying. So I think sensitization of the citizens towards paying water taxes, and property tax, it's very important, because electricity they will pay, because if you don't pay, your electricity connection will get disconnected, right? Similarly, I think these things also need to be by and by sensitized.
Thank you, ma'am, for this excellent lecture. I have a very small question. As I work in the suburban areas, which are already kind of not properly planned and already being congested, and they are under the parastatal bodies mostly, I'm talking about the Kolkata metropolitan area itself. The problem is with the expansion of road, expansion of drainage facility, given that the real estate properties are increasing very rapidly. In such scenarios, these cities, how they can plan on their own, given their functional authorities are also very limited regarding land use change and planning. So what will your suggestion be on this city's planning?
So beyond the city boundary, the Kolkata Metropolitan Corporation has the jurisdiction. It's under the jurisdiction of KMC. However, I believe there is a greater Kolkata Metropolitan Development Authority. I think it is the onus of that organization to take care of the areas which have gone beyond the KMC area. So again, the point which I was making is sensitization of all our key stakeholders, because if some become very rigid and are still living 50 years down the back, it doesn't make sense. They also need to understand the impact of climate, and whatever we do just now in terms of creation of new infrastructure, I think green infrastructure and green financing should be the mantra. So that is very important while we create our infrastructure, or even when we go for an upgradation.
Thank you, madam, for your very good elaboration. Um, I think NIO is also doing capacity building program, what you have told. But I think in this policy, rationalization of human resources, it need to be addressed, because we don't have a cadre in municipal management, which is vitally missing all over the country. I mean, one civil service or state service people come and he works as a urban manager practically, and he stays for 2 3 years and he goes to the another department, and he is not accountable for the development what he makes. Many government, central government policies, state government policies, he also does as per his own training and program, but they are not accountable whether he does it or not. We don't also, even if he goes for capacity building, I think there should be a fixed cadre who will be, even if he is transferred to some other post, he should be holding another urban manager post, so that he can do it in a nice way. Because nowadays expertise is most important. If he is expert in certain field, he should be in that field only. He should not go to any other field, so that he can, our motto is satisfied what you all policies are doing, but these policies are failing mostly because of this.
Yeah, point well taken. I think this point came up in our working group on capacity building. It came from most of the experts, and they also went for stressed on this federalization in municipal staff. And so, see, from the central government, we can suggest, we can propose, we can send advisories. Because urban development is a state subject, it is the state government who finally has to take a decision. We can nudge them, but we cannot implement on their behalf. So that is a challenge on our side. So through various working groups, through various advisories, we are trying to nudge states. but we cannot take a decision.
But madam, the urban planners or the other this urban managers, they are expert in that and they are trained for that. But other people are in the post. So how can we make them responsible also? And even if they are trained for 15 days or 1 month, how can they know the details of a even what even my during my studies also when I was in SPA, I studied property tax management and so many municipal management, but I never worked in any urban managerial post. So this happens.
Point well taken. Very well taken.
Thank you,
Thank you.
madam. Thank you.
Thank you again, ma'am, for this, I think, very informative answers to our, I think, very pointed questions and very appropriate questions. I, not just in this conference, for the last several years, we've been part of so many discussions, workshops, conferences, and of course, our informal interactions. And the urban domain is very small. The number of people there are extremely small. We all know each other. The things that keep repeatedly coming up, capacity is at the top of the list. Uh, the breaking of silos, because urban is a whole world. You can't separate out any of the other departments from the urban in that sense. The integrated planning and sequencing of infrastructure, for example, you don't have to keep digging up roads every time. The lack of planning, and more importantly, something which our secretary pointed out yesterday, the inability to plan before development happens. Like the town planning scheme of Gujarat attempts that to some extent, but no other place really has that. So I would say our methods of planning itself are a problem. So as planners, we haven't made ourselves necessary enough and not shown the results on the ground that we will be valued for our skills. So these are things that keep coming up, and redefinition is another one. I think a couple of years ago, 2, 3 years ago, WRI had a workshop on this because the government of India had asked in Bangalore, and I think the same things had come up as in your working group. Uh, the question that comes to mind is that despite this being absolutely clearly recognized problems which are bedeviling the sector, it doesn't, nothing seems to change. The challenges remain the same, and it's always these issues. These are the bottlenecks. And as we always say, bottlenecks are at the top of the bottle. So what do we do about it? And that's a question that has plagued me. And since you are at the center of policy making, I think in a sense, I'm pushing you to bring this up. That why is it that everywhere we talk about this, but nothing is really, there's no effect of our the one thought that also occurs here is that because I was part of this whole process in the rural area, and the breakthroughs were made. When villages didn't have any kind of structure, Sarpanch used to have the village panchayat in his household if he wants to. From there till today, when we're doing decentralized planning of some sort, but okay, there are gram sabhas, there are other things. And when I see the urban, this is kind of, and one of the things that happened is what you mentioned, incentivizing. It is a state government subject. But what was done then that through the BRGF, Backwards Area Grant Fund, states were incentivized to both do the decentralized planning and to change the structures. The second thing was done that was, and I think that is what NIUA is also doing, is that there was a network of institutions. Every state had a state institute of rural development, which also then was extended to state institute of rural development and local governance, so that they could train, they could undertake in the cascading mode, they could undertake training. So everybody was trained. Lakhs and lakhs of people, elected representatives being trained every 5 years. They set up that system. I think we need to look to that and probably think about what needs to be done to catalyze that. And if there can be some incentivizing of state governments through these programs, I mean, you say I'm just putting it out there, We won't give Amrit funds unless you do XYZ. Yeah. So I think that is one of the only ways that the central government can nudge. I know it's a nudge, not always legally tenable, but okay, I'm sure there are.
The burnout of our finances, if you look at that, it's very poor utilization because if you for the 15th FC grants, the same is with other centrally sponsored missions because once they are reform linked that you do this and you get this. So if they are unable to do, we cannot release the funds. And it again reflects very badly on our performance. When the CAPSEC, yeah, so yeah.
That's true. No, you're right. I mean, it's not as straightforward and easy. But I think without incentivizing, it can't happen. That's everybody is aware of. But about utilization, even without those kinds of arm twisting, I think utilization suffers because of capacities, as you know. So its absorptive capacity is simply not there, which we saw with JNURM. You know, it couldn't be absorbed because nobody could prepare their CDPs. So yeah, so we've had I think, a very informative and well, for that, I would add to, ma'am, I think something that we say in the school, our tagline in some sense, we don't say people, planet, and prosperity. We say people, planet, place, because it has to be contextual, parity, and then prosperity follows. Let's forget prosperity. So that's our tagline. So thank you again, ma'am, for this time and the insights and for, I mean, many of them are students, but we have participants from all over, and we have other officers and very learned speakers, experienced speakers here also. So I think all of us have benefited. So thank you again.
Thank you, Dr. Kundu, for a truly illuminating address. Your profound insights into the nuances of urban policy have deeply enriched the disclosure of this session. Okay, that brings. That brings us to the formal conclusion of our plenary session. I now request all of you to please move to IC2 dining hall for lunch and please carry your iCards along and do visit the food and the handloom stalls near the amphitheater. We would like you to reconvene here at 2 o'clock for the Innovatics. Thank you.